Liberalism. Liberalism is a political ideology that champions individual freedom, political democracy, and the rule of law. Liberals typically believe in protecting individual rights such as freedom of speech, religion, and the press, seeing these rights as crucial to personal development and autonomy. Economically, liberalism supports free markets and minimal interference from the government, advocating that such conditions foster innovation and personal initiative. The ideology emerged as a reaction against authoritarianism and feudal privilege, becoming a driving force for modern democratic societies. Liberals argue that a government's role is to provide the framework for liberty and equality through laws and policies that ensure fair opportunities for all citizens. Conservatism. Conservatism is an ideology based on preserving traditional values and institutions, emphasizing stability and continuity. Conservatives hold a deep respect for the cultural heritage and social structures that have stood the test of time, believing that they embody collective wisdom about what works best in society. They argue that gradual evolution rather than radical changes ensures stable and functional governance. Economically, conservatives often advocate for free markets but accept a certain level of intervention to preserve social order and moral values. They are skeptical about the effectiveness of large-scale government programs, preferring local and individual solutions. This ideology appeals to those who see rapid changes as potentially disruptive and harmful to societal cohesion. Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love. Socialism. Socialism advocates for the collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods. Socialists argue that capitalistic systems, where production is primarily driven by profit, lead to inequality and exploitation of the working class. They believe in redistributing wealth more equitably and providing a universal safety net including healthcare, education, and social services. The goal is to create a society where resources are distributed based on people's needs rather than market forces. Modern socialism often works within democratic frameworks, pushing for reforms that increase social welfare and reduce business influences on politics. It seeks to empower workers and reduce disparities in wealth and power. Communism. Communism is a radical form of socialism that seeks a classless, stateless society where all property is owned communally. Originating from the ideas of Karl Marx, communists believe that capitalist systems inherently exploit workers and that a revolutionary overthrow of capitalist structures is necessary to achieve a society where the production and distribution of goods are controlled by the entire community. In practice, however, communist states have often resulted in authoritarian regimes that prioritize state control over individual freedoms. Communism aims for a utopian outcome where everyone works according to their ability and receives according to their needs, eliminating economic disparities. Fascism is an authoritarian and nationalistic political ideology that emerged in early 20th century Europe. Fascists believe in a strong, centralized government led by a dictatorial leader, and they reject democracy in favor of totalitarian control. The ideology emphasizes aggressive nationalism and often racial purity, advocating for the suppression of political opposition and the subordination of individual rights to the goals of the nation or a race. Economically, fascism allows for private property but with significant state control. The ideology is associated with militarism, glorifying war and strength as expressions of national spirit. Fascism's legacy is marred by oppression, intense militarism, and genocides, as seen in Nazi Germany. Anarchism. Anarchism is a political ideology that opposes all forms of involuntary, coercive government, advocating for self-managed, stateless societies based on voluntary, cooperative institutions. Anarchists argue that the state inherently oppresses individuals and that true freedom can only be achieved when all forms of hierarchical authority are abolished. Instead of traditional states, anarchists support a society organized around mutual aid, voluntary association, and direct democracy. This ideology spans a range of ideas, from extreme individualism to communal living arrangements, but all anarchists reject the idea of a centralized state as a solution to social problems, emphasizing personal autonomy and group cooperation. Libertarianism champions individual liberty against excessive government control, advocating minimal state interference in personal and economic affairs. Libertarians argue that individuals should be free to live their lives as they choose, so long as they do not infringe on the rights of others. Economically, they support free market capitalism, believing that government regulations stifle innovation and economic growth. This ideology is rooted in the classical liberal tradition but places a greater emphasis on personal freedom and voluntary association. Libertarians are often skeptical about the government's ability to effectively manage social programs, preferring private charity and business solutions to social issues. Environmentalism. Environmentalism is a broad ideology focused on the protection and preservation of the natural environment through both individual changes in behavior and large-scale governmental action. Environmentalists emphasize the importance of sustainable management of resources, conservation of ecosystems, and prevention of pollution. They advocate for policies that reduce human impact on the environment, such as regulating industrial emissions, preserving natural habitats, and promoting renewable energy sources. This ideology also encompasses broader concerns about global environmental issues like climate change, advocating for international cooperation to tackle these challenges. Environmentalism often intersects with other political ideologies, influencing policy decisions on local, national, and global scales. Nationalism. Nationalism is a political ideology that emphasizes the interests of a particular nation or ethnic group, often placing it above international considerations. Nationalists argue that the interests of their nation should be the primary focus of their government and seek to preserve their nation's sovereignty against external influence. This ideology often involves a sense of shared heritage, culture, language, or religion, and it can serve as a powerful unifying force within a country. However, nationalism can also lead to exclusionary or aggressive policies toward other nations or internal minorities, and at its extreme, it can fuel xenophobia and conflict. Feminism. Feminism is an ideology focused on advocating for gender equality and fighting against gender-based discrimination. Feminists work to address issues such as disparities in pay, rights, legal status, and access to education and healthcare. The movement encompasses a variety of perspectives on what equality means and how it should be achieved, ranging from liberal feminism that seeks equal opportunities within the existing structures to radical feminism that challenges the very foundations of societal norms and institutions. Feminism has evolved over several waves, each with different focuses ranging from suffrage and political rights to broader social and cultural inequalities. Libertarian Socialism. Libertarian socialism is an anti-authoritarian ideology that seeks to abolish capitalism and the state, advocating for a society based on voluntary cooperation and the communal ownership of production resources. Unlike more centralized forms of socialism, it emphasizes direct democracy or consensus democracy, alongside the decentralization of power. Followers believe that individuals should have free access to the resources necessary to fulfill their needs without oppressive systems of control. This ideology promotes a form of governance through local collectives and communes without the bureaucratic structures of a state. It is a fusion of libertarian principles of autonomy and freedom with socialist ideals of economic equality and community ownership. Centrism. Centrism is a political ideology that advocates for a balanced approach, often incorporating moderate policies from both the left and the right. Centrists tend to seek middle ground solutions, emphasizing compromise and pragmatism over ideological purity. This ideology is characterized by a preference for moderate policies and government intervention in the economy only to the extent necessary to maintain stability and growth. Centrists often focus on practical solutions to social, economic, and political issues, aiming to avoid the extremes of political discourse. They can be seen as flexible and adaptable, often willing to change their positions based on new information or shifting public needs. Authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is a form of governance characterized by strong central power and limited political freedoms. Individual freedoms are subordinate to the state and there is no constitutional accountability under an authoritarian regime. Political opposition is often suppressed or limited, and a wide array of governmental functions are controlled by the ruler or a small group. Supporters of authoritarianism argue that it provides stability, efficiency, and the ability to rapidly implement policies, which can be seen as advantages in times of crisis or severe social instability. However, critics argue that it leads to abuses of power, the stifling of individual rights and freedoms, and a lack of democratic accountability. Syndicalism. Syndicalism is a type of economic and political theory that advocates for the transfer of power from capitalists to workers. It proposes that industries be organized into syndicates or trade unions, which would collectively own and manage the means of production and distribution. The ultimate goal is to establish a society where workers directly control their workplaces and the economy as a whole, eliminating the need for traditional states or capitalist business structures. Syndicalists emphasize direct action, including strikes and other forms of industrial action, as a key method for workers to gain power and enact social change. This ideology has its roots in the labor movement and is closely related to anarchist thought.